Most of us spend a lot of time thinking about the gap between what our lives are and what we wish they would be. We formulate stories about why this gap exists and why we've been unable to close it. On today's show, Dr. Lee Warren explains to us how to close this gap, and he calls it doing self brain surgery. Don't worry, you won't need a scalpel. I can't wait for you to learn from his life giving practices. Welcome to the This Is Your Nudge podcast. I'm your host, Laura L. Smith. Join me as I talk with the most amazing guests about how we can stop making excuses, step out of someday, and into the promises and goodness God has for us today. This is your nudge. Make sure you're following the show so you don't miss a single episode, and join me on Substack and Instagram at Laura Smith Author for more biblical encouragement. Today, I'm chatting with Dr. Lee Warren. Dr. Lee is a neurosurgeon, author, and podcaster. He's also a dear friend. Dr. Lee wants to guide us as we explore how neuroscience and faith connect to help us achieve healing, hope, and higher performance in every area of your life. Dr. Lee, hello, friend. What a delight to have you on.
Laura, it's a pleasure to be back with you. Thank you.
So I read a recent Substack that you just wrote, and it said most of us have a mental gap that we can't stop thinking about, the gap between what our lives are and what we think our lives should be. This hit home and felt so perfect for this show because we chat here about the way God is nudging us to step into abundant life, and closing this gap feels like something the Lord is nudging us all to do. Can we talk about this gap? Where do we find it occurring in our lives?
Absolutely. So I think everybody has it, whether we acknowledge it or not. And I think it shows up in all kinds of different areas. But it's just this idea that we have a place where we believe that we should be or would have been if something happened that would have been was different than what actually happened, or that if somebody hadn't done this thing to us, we would have been in this place. And so many of us spend a lot of time in our life sort of frustrated and angsty and feeling kind of stuck because something external to us kept us from achieving this place that we think we should have been, or that we have shame over some place that we failed or we messed up, or we went through a divorce or something happened and we didn't hit this target that we thought we were supposed to hit. And we had this vision in our mind of I'm this talented, I should be this successful by this point in my life, I should be making this much money, or be married to the quarterback, or whatever it is. At whatever age of your life you are, you've got this idea of where you should be, and then you have this reality of where you are. And so we have two responses to that we can have. We can either figure out the real reasons why we're not where we are, which most of the time has more to do with us than it does with all those external things that we've been using as sort of blaming the gap on. Or we can decide this is just how it is for me. This is just how I am. This is what my life's going to be. And we can settle for being where we are. And so I think the majority of people in the world either don't contemplate why they feel so sort of stuck, or why they feel frustrated with their lives, and they don't really think about it and think that there could be anything to be done about it. Or we settle and we treat the symptom of our cognitive dysfunction or cognitive dissonance over where we actually are with something to make us not feel as bad: scrolling, alcohol, numbing behavior of some sort, and we just live with it. And so I think that's kind of where most people are. And that can show up in your profession, it can show up in your marriage, in your spiritual life, in your financial life, it can show up in your parenting and in your relationship with your parents. And it can show up just kind of as this general sort of vague angst that most of us feel. And so I think I wrote that piece, and it relates to what I wrote in my book, just to say that it's actually true that none of us are ever actually stuck where we are. We can always move. And the way we have to move comes down to addressing the things that are true about why we are where we are, which again usually has less to do with external circumstances than it does with our internal choices.
And let's be honest, Jesus doesn't want us to settle, ever.
That's right.
Like, he always wants more for us. He talks about this
Yep.
abundant life and being bold and how he equips us to do mighty things. So settling doesn't match his teaching at all.
That's right.
So
That's
how
right.
do we close this gap? And I think that you might even say that sometimes, like, where we think we should be has to come to a different place too, because sometimes we're like,
Yeah.
oh, I should be married and have 3 kids. Well, that's not always true either. But how do we close this gap? How do neuroscience and faith shrink the distance from here to there?
That's a good question. And let me just clarify one thing, because I want to make sure that the listener, that nobody out there thinks we're talking about a level of financial success or reward or recognition or something that we deserve. Like, I'm not saying that all of us should be wealthier, more externally successful, or any of those things. It's not some sort of prosperity idea that I'm preaching here. I'm saying that all of us have a sense of our purpose, our mission, our impact, and where we're supposed to be in our life and where we actually are. And so when we talk about abundance, for example, like John 10:10, where Jesus said, "The thief comes to steal and kill and destroy, but I've come that you might have life and have it abundantly." He's not talking necessarily about a certain amount of dollars in your bank account or freedom from illness or any of those things. So but
Or
just
more
make sure.
followers or the perfect marriage or
Right.
any of that. Right.
Right, so let's just make sure we're all on the same page, that we don't have a category error here, in the sense that we're all talking about the same thing. So when I say abundance, I'm really talking about flourishing in your life, in your mental health, in your spiritual life, in your relationships. I'm talking about achieving the type of abundance that Jesus achieved, because he wasn't a wealthy man. He
No,
wasn't going out and having a stress-free life, right? He was
not at all.
castigated and crucified and all those things. So when Jesus talked about abundance, he obviously wasn't talking about, if you say the right things and do the right things, you're going to be rewarded with financial gain or whatever. So just so we're on the same page.
Right. He's
That
talking
being
about
said,
love, joy, peace, hope.
that's right. That's right. So the fully realized human life doesn't relate to external markers of success by the world's standards. So
Right.
just to be really crystal clear. So that being said, neurologically, neuroscientifically, we can improve our lot in life significantly by understanding that what makes us a fully realized person is about the decisions that we make and the internal character marks that we hit and the standards that we hit related to what we're supposed to be in terms of the kind of person that we're supposed to be. And so I think the real trouble that we have is when we define ourselves by those external things or by other people's standards for us, and not by what God says you're supposed to be. And so the way your brain works is your mind sort of tells your brain what to pay attention to and what to look for and what to care about and what to believe in. And then your brain sets out to prove to you that that's true of your world. So your brain starts to filter and look for evidence. If you say to yourself all the time, "I'm stuck, everybody overlooks me, nobody cares about me, I'm never going to be successful," your brain will begin to try to prove to you that that's true and to protect you from the harm that comes from people doing those things to you. And your life will become progressively more and more defined by the reality that you're looking for. And this isn't some kind of manifestation metaphysical idea. This is like literally what your brainstem does with the reticular activating system in your brain. It sets the filter on what your reality becomes based on your internal dialogue with yourself of what you tell your brain to care about and look for. And so that's why when you start defining what is good and what is true and what is noble by God's standards, then you start to filter and look for those things that God wants you to look for in your life. That relates to that verse that says, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart." What that means is not that everything you dream up, he's going to put in your bank account. It means that when you delight yourself in him, you line your nervous system with his will for your life. He's going to start showing you the things that you want that will actually satisfy you.
Amen.
Because if you think about it for a second, every time you've ever thought that if you could just get that one more thing, that God had proposed to you, or that promotion, or the number of sales on your latest book, or whatever, the number of followers on Instagram that you said, every time you've thought in your life that that thing would satisfy you and you'd finally be happy, when you got that thing, it wasn't very much longer before the target moved and you needed something else to make you feel that again. Right. And so the truth is that external things never actually satisfy us for very long. So it turns out on the neurotransmitter level that serotonin and dopamine, like if you look for dopamine as your reward and as your source of pleasure, dopamine continually requires another hit, another external thing to make you feel what you used to feel, which is the short slope to addiction of any sort, of alcohol or Instagram or whatever. If you're looking for true joy, what we would call abundance, that's a serotonin function, and that comes from things that last, meaningful things,
Mm.
human relationship, spiritual depth, those kinds of things. So if we change our targets from short-lived external validation and things that give us dopamine rewards to things that give us long-lasting serotonin type true joy, that's when you get into that beatitudes thing where Jesus is talking about blessed is he that does this. That word in the Hebrew in the Greek rather, is makarios, which is doesn't really have anything to do with being blessed in the way that we think, like you're going to get something, you're receiving some type of reward. It really has to do more with this sort of joy, happiness idea. That makarios is the word that we turned into macaroni and macaroons and the Macarena. These words that relate to joy, right? Dancing and being joyful. And so when Jesus says, blessed are you when this, he's saying you're going to be happy if you build your life around these kinds of principles and these sorts of things become your character. If you turn into the kind of person who's meek and humble and looks for the right sorts of rewards, that's where real happiness lies. And the other thing it connotes is, especially in the Hebrew, that word asher that in the Greek turns into makarios is a word that's related to not happiness or giddiness or receiving things. It relates to a sense of sort of imperturbability, this sort of untouchability. And these kinds
Mm.
of people that you meet in your life that nothing that happens around them ever seems to knock them off their game and they always seem to be okay no matter what they're going through. That's the word in the Old Testament when he uses, and it also is often used in connotations that relate to hope. And so happiness and joy and hope and all those kinds of things that would define sort of an abundant, fully realized life have to do with developing the kind of character that can sustain adversity and be untouchable through it. And so if you say what really makes a person able to tolerate a gap or to say how do we close this gap, it's when I know that if I'm living the life that I'm called to live, it doesn't matter if I get externally rewarded or not. I'm going to be okay because I know I'm serving out my purpose. Like Viktor Frankl wrote a lot about suffering, right?
Man's Search for
And
Meaning, great book. I'll link it.
exactly. One of the best-selling books of all time, and the reason is because it puts its finger on the pulse of what we all wonder about, which is what's my life for, right? And Frankl said this thing about, okay, suffering stops being suffering when you find the purpose in it.
Oh,
And so if you talk
so
about
good.
gaps, like if you understand what your purpose is, and I'll give you an example from my life, like I thought my purpose was to be a neurosurgeon. Like I thought I was supposed to be a doctor and operate on people and all that. And then after I lost my son, back in 2013, as you and I've talked about before, I figured out that it- there might it might be possible for me to have been so gutted by that I wasn't going to be able to work anymore. I wasn't sure, and then I thought, well, if I'm not a neurosurgeon, what am I? Like, what does my life
Right.
mean? And so I started searching out, like, what is my real purpose? Like, if I lose, if something happens and I can't operate, or if I'm not defined by being Dr. Warren anymore, and I'm just a guy again, a kid from Oklahoma, like a normal person. What is my life about? And I figured out, like, all of a sudden God kind of clarified it. And my purpose is to help people figure out what hurts them and what to do about it. And
Mm.
I can do that function as a writer, as a podcaster, as a friend, as a colleague. I can do that as a neurosurgeon. And so then all of a sudden, all these different things that I seem to be chasing in my life in different ways, even the ones I didn't understand why I felt driven to do them, all of a sudden they were one thing. And now all the things that I do are all about that purpose of helping people figure out what hurts them and what to do about it. And that gap disappeared in my life. Between all of a sudden, I'm not sure what I'm shooting at. I'm not sure what I'm for. I'm not sure if I can't do this anymore, if I still have value, meaning, purpose, if I don't recover from the loss of my son and able to go back to work and do the thing I used to do I still matter? All of a
Mm.
sudden I know, like, and now I know I'm here. And
Yeah.
that's why Frankel finished that book. If you remember, like he said, man can create the gas chambers. He can do those horrible things, but he can also walk into them with the Shema on his lips, with the Lord's Prayer on
Mm.
his lips.
Right.
Like he can find his purpose. And even though he's suffering and even though he's walking into the gas chamber, he knows what his life's about. He knows what the purpose of it is. He knows what this moment is about. And he's abundant, even there in the worst possible scenario. Right.
Mm.
So I think that's a long answer to your question. But when we contemplate these gaps in our lives, they really turn out to be more about, am I fulfilling my purpose, than am I receiving enough validation or reward or followers or money or whatever.
So good. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Viktor Frankl, real fast, he was in a concentration camp during World War II and was also a psychologist. And while he was there, was actually, because that's just how his brain works, he was wondering how people were surviving or not, and where their joy was from in those situations, and what this stripping of kind of worldly identities did to someone. So I will link it
Yeah.
in the show notes because it is a great reminder of how we find our identity and our joy. Like you said, that he could go into a gas chamber saying, I will love the Lord my God with all my heart and all
Yeah.
my soul and all my strength, right? Saying the Shema. What an amazing thing if we could all say that everywhere we were, no matter what was
Yeah.
going on. Okay, so Dr. Lee, you gave an example from your life of how this worked when you tragically lost your son. How about some of the things we were saying at the beginning, though, just for the everyday person who's like, their gap might be, I thought by now I would be, say, married or have a better job or whatever. And we're not talking about those worldly things we said can't bring us joy,
Yeah.
but what would you say a practical step for them would be today? Like, should they sit down and actually be like, what is my actual purpose? Like you said, you got forced to a point where you had to evaluate it, but I think a lot of us don't evaluate it until maybe something tragic happens. Is that what people should do? Be like, hey, what is my purpose if these things don't happen, if it's not going how I want? Or are there some other practical things we can be doing today to kind of retrain our brains?
Yeah. So I think first, evaluate the reality of the gap that you perceive, because sometimes it might be okay. I have a friend who is an Olympic gold medalist. He was a bobsledder and won a gold medal. And he and I talked about this one time about how there are people who feel frustrated in their life because they're supposed to be Olympians and they're on the couch instead. That they've got the talent, they've got the opportunity, they have the body, the physiology, and all that, and they just haven't done the work. And so they're frustrated and they're stuck because they just why didn't I get a gold medal? You know, this
They
guy
haven't put in the hours.
I beat him in college, and why didn't I make the team? Well, you didn't train hard enough, right? So
Yeah,
so
right.
sometimes there's a reality that says investigate the gap and ask the Lord to reveal to you if you have done your part to close the gap. Like maybe you are supposed to have written the great American novel or to have married that guy or whatever. Maybe there is a gap because you need to do something different than you have done. He said, we're born looking like our parents, but we die looking like our decisions.
That's good.
And that's a powerful line. And it
Is
wasn't his line. He quoted somebody else. So I'll think of it eventually. But basically the idea there is that most of what we turn out to be in our life, and this is true when we get into the part of this conversation, if we talk about epigenetics or how neuroscience is affecting our future generations and all that stuff, most of what turns out to be true in our lives is more about the choices that we make than it is about other things that we can't control. And so if you're starting to say, okay, what can I do about this gap issue? The first one is be honest with yourself about why and what the gap is. Like, is it just something I sort of want because I need to be satisfied in some way or I want to be validated in some way and I really need to be happy where I am and to be fully performing at this level that God's placed me in, this time and this space and this opportunity that He's putting right in front of me. Maybe the gap is something I'm just not being content. And so
mhm,
contentment's important, right? Or maybe the gap is there because I really haven't performed at the level that I ought to be performing, I'm capable of. And so maybe I'm engaging in some behaviors in my life that are keeping me in this place. And if
mhm,
I did some work to get rid of those things, maybe I would actually be there. Maybe it's
right.
fitness, maybe it's mental health, maybe it's something, maybe it's a habit or an addiction that we have that I know is hindering me. Is that Hebrews 12 thing, which, let us cast off everything that hinders and
Right.
the sin that so easily entangles, which I think is important to distinguish there that God says not everything that's holding you back is sinful. Like sometimes it's just
Right.
stuff you need to get rid of that's holding you back. It's not the right thing for you at this moment in your life. And so I think a practical step all of us can take is to be very curious and introspective about our own real, true situation, what your dreams and aspirations are. So your perception of the gap, is it because I'm just frustrated and I want something more than I have, but I really should be content where I am? So does the gap need to down adjust to where I actually am and maybe I'm where I'm supposed to be and I should be content with it? Or is there really a gap and I can do something about it if I change my behavior or my decisions or get rid of some things in my life that are keeping me from being where I really am supposed to be? Or maybe it's somewhere in the middle, right? And we need to down adjust the gap, but we also need to improve our performance a
Some
little
things
bit.
we
So
need to be doing. Yeah.
and so I think introspection and curiosity about ourselves and our own decisions is important rather than what we frequently do is look to find and establish blame or excuse for why we are where we are. And if it's something, those people keep doing that thing and I can't control that. So I'm just stuck and I have to live with that. Like, so to make sure that the gap is real, that it's right, that your behavior isn't keeping you where you are, or that where you are is actually where you should be, and you just need to learn to accept God's place and time for you. When he said to Jeremiah said to the people that They were exiled and they were all frustrated about where they were. And what was God's prescription to them was, hey, you're here, build
Right.
houses, get involved, like tend the land, like work and live where you are right now. And there's going to come a time when I'm going to deliver you, but right now this is where I have you. And so live, like be alive while you're alive.
To
And
the
so I think
fullest. Yeah.
live and live fully and engage and impact other people and do the things that you're supposed to do. And one thing that's true, and again, neurologically very true too, and I think scripturally so, is that you will feel better wherever you are if you move, if you get active. So don't sit and ponder and worry and ruminate and stress and gripe and yell at people online and do all those things and drink and whatever. Don't be frustrated and stuck. Rather, get active in your life. Like if my problem is that I'm not active enough, I need to exercise more. I need to quit drinking alcohol. I need to change my diet. I need to get my health squared away. If my problem is that I'm financially not where I want to be, but I'm spending $12,000 a month on Amazon Prime stuff that I don't need, then I need to get
Zoinks.
myself right. I mean, but we need to so we need to do some things to get ourselves fit financially, mentally, spiritually, relationally, all those things, so that where we are, if it needs to move, can move under the direction of the things that we're able to change in our lives under our own steam and with God's help. And so I
Because
think
the Lord
practically
always invites us into partnering with Him.
always.
Always.
And
So
it
it's
go ahead.
like if you're feeling lonely and you're like, I don't have any friends, I don't have, like, I don't feel connected because that's
Right.
it. We're in this big loneliness epidemic in our
Yeah.
nation. When was the last time you texted someone? When was the last time you invited someone to do something, right?
That's right.
I think, yes, that proactively and ask the Lord, what can I do today to help close this gap, Lord? Like, I wish I had more friends. I wish I was more connected. What can I do today? And that could be literally seeing the person at the store or the coffee shop and taking time to go over to them and talk to
That's
them and
right.
ask them to do something with you. But
That's right.
we can pray. We can see if our goals are actually, like you said, are they goals that would really bring us joy? Are they really of the Lord? And then, yes, I love that. Like, what can you actively do?
That's right.
That's awesome. Going to take a break from that great conversation for just a minute to share a couple of things with you all. What would change if you truly believed God's power is available to you right now? Brave Woman, Mighty God, 30 Things You Can Do invite you to stop waiting for perfect conditions and start taking faithful action today. With simple, practical steps rooted in Scripture, this book helps you live courageously in everyday moments, trusting a mighty God who goes before you. You don't have to be fearless to be brave. You just have to take the next step and trust Jesus in that step. Grab your copy of Brave Woman, Mighty God wherever books are sold and start living with holy confidence today. If you love fashion but want to be a good steward of what you have, Nuuly is a game changer. This is what I use, guys. Each month I get to choose pieces that fit my real life and the season I'm in without overbuying or letting clothes pile up. I wear them, enjoy them, and send them back when I'm done. There's no long-term commitment. You can cancel anytime. This is genuinely what I use for my outfits, and it helps me have fun, feel confident, and be content with less. Check the link in the show notes for $30 off your first month and try Nuuly for yourself. All right, back to the show.
There's this verse, I think it's Romans 8:6. I could be wrong on that, but I think it's 8:6. It says, it is the Lord that works in us to will and to act according to his good pleasure. So
Mm.
that means, so when you feel a nudge, that's God saying, hey, I've got something for you. But also, he works in you to do the things that he wants you to do. He makes you want to do them and he equips you to do them. And so if you're feeling a nudge, it's not that you're necessarily just a malcontent. It might be that God is saying, hey, I've got something for you, but you got to get after it. And you don't have to do it alone. I'm going to empower you to do it. And by the way, I've given you a nervous system that'll connect to your mind, that will tell your body what to do. I will support you with the design and plan that I've given you in your body. I will call in to help all the people that you need that are going to make this happen. I will equip you for the calling I have for you. And so I think part of it too is to say, I know I don't need to ever feel like it's impossible for me. If God is calling me to something, he will provide the necessary things. And he's already wired me. Peter said, God's given you everything you need for life and godliness. Like it's already wired into you. And something, Laura, that I just recently discovered that I'm nerding out on in my personal study time is when God says something, it's not just true sort of poetically or metaphorically, like it's always true all the way down. If it's true metaphorically, it's true medically. If it's true sort of on the feeling level, then it's also going to be true on the physics level. Like it's going to turn out to be a true thing. When God says something, it's all the way true. And so that means you can count on it. Like you can say, this is
Amen.
not just a motivational thing. God's nudging me and I got to figure out how to do it. Like he's already wired you. He's calling you. He's equipping you. He has built you. He has designed you. He's going to put the people around you to help you do it. So if you're feeling stuck, like part of it is kick the kickstand up and start pedaling
I love
because
it.
he's gonna help you. Like I remember in the Old Testament, like when he called the people to cross the Jordan, he said, "Step into the river, and then I'll part the water." Like
Right,
like
you
it's
gotta do this first. Yep.
right. Like so you got to move, and in moving, you're going to start getting that neurotransmitter thing kicking in. You're going to feel better. You're going to start to get some momentum. There's a part of your brain called the mid anterior cingulate cortex. It's this right in the middle. And the mid anterior cingulate turns out to be related to willpower and the switching from one emotional state to another one. And so this is
Mm,
important if any of our listeners they're kind of stuck in grief or they feel depressed and they can't move and they just feel kind of like their life has been sort of narrowed by something they've been through and they're stuck. And I felt this way after my son died. It turns out that the mid anterior cingulate is the neurological structure that is stuck in people that have complex grief. This has been really well
mm,
studied, and you can put somebody in a scanner who's been in that. There's people that get stuck in grief that get into this yearning thing where they want so bad to have the person that they lost that they just can't look forward into the future anymore,
yeah,
and they're just
right.
stuck, and they can be that way for 20 years, and most of us know
Mhm.
somebody like that, like, and it's so sad. But what they found in neuroimaging is that mid anterior cingulate just turns off in those people.
Mm.
It's just the part that you need to shift you into a different emotional state gets
Yeah.
stuck. And they've shown that the way to get it unstuck is to do something that you don't feel like doing. And this turns out to be really interesting. So you get up in the morning and you're super depressed and you don't feel good. Make your bed. Like do a thing that seems distasteful or hard to you, right? Send a text message, go to a support group, but, do something simple like go for a walk when you don't feel like it. Oh, my knee hurts, so I don't want to exercise. Well, guess what? You exercise, your knee won't hurt, right? Like do something. And then what happens is the mid anterior cingulate begins to lay down wires, literal synaptic connections to reinforce itself to sort of say, okay, if you're going to make me do something I don't want to do, then I need to reinforce that so the next time it'll be easier for me to do something when I don't want to do it. And what'll happen then is the mid anterior cingulate starts to become, it generates a lower barrier, a lower amount of inertia the next time you need to do something hard, whatever it is. And so then all of a sudden, these people that are stuck in complex grief, they found that if they just start making their bed or they just start cooking breakfast or they just start doing one thing, then all of a sudden they can start to think about the future again. They can start to make a phone call to connect with somebody. And all of a sudden, they re-image these people and their mid-anterior cingulates are more active.
So
And so
cool.
it turns right. So it turns out to be that the path to overcoming stuckness or being trapped in the gap or whatever, the path to overcoming that is making yourself do something that you don't feel like doing. God has wired you to become more resilient because you push through something that seems hard. And that turns out to be exactly what Romans 5:3-5 said all along. We know that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. So, friend, like you're spiritually promised that if you go through suffering, God can make you stronger on the other side of it and make you more hopeful. And neurologically, you're built that you can't really get to hope and character without having gone through suffering and endurance first. And so that should give all of us this great amount of hope because you have
Yeah,
agency, right? You have the ability to say, if I can just take a step, my brain's going to reward me by making it easier for me to take the second step.
yeah,
And then before you
amen.
know it, you're moving again. Your life starts to have some forward momentum again, some wind at your back again, because you chose to believe that when God calls you, he equips you.
Amen. I love that, Dr. Lee. So good in the places that we're super stuck. How about in the places where we're just kind of convinced by the noise of the world that we can't or we don't deserve or we don't it might not be that we've been stuck there for a long time um or maybe it has, but how do we retrain our brains to not believe the lies? And like we're getting integrated. Social media, love-hate relationship, both you and I are on it to help share the messages that God gave us, and that's super important and super awesome, but also we get bombarded with how we should look and what we should have, and
Yeah.
a lot of lies of what we're supposed to, I'm putting in air quotes, have achieved or have done, which I think also creates this gap loop I'm talking about. How do we, as Paul instructs us, hold every thought captive and retrain our brains to not think, oh, well, I'm not pretty enough, smart enough, young enough, talented enough, whatever, to do the thing that I feel God is calling me to do?
It's a great question, and it's going to require some a neuroscience class here. So I'm going to give you the answer, but I got to get nerdy for a second. So
Everybody get out their pens.
get your pencil out, pen or pencil, and Google. Do anybody even have a pencil anymore? I don't know.
I
That's
don't
how
know.
old I am. Have pencils. So here's the thing: we are in a cultural moment where we are being encouraged, especially our young people. We're being encouraged to follow our hearts and live our truths and believe our feelings. And I heard a sitting elected United States Congressperson say in an interview that our feelings are more important than objective truth. That what you feel should be honored and validated, even if it's contrary to something that somebody else can test and prove. That your feelings matter to you. And I just want to tell you, like, that prescription is a prescription for misery and lack of flourishing. So if you just want to believe me for a second, I'm going to tell you why that's true. It's been shown now very conclusively in numerous studies using neuroimaging and good psychological research that a stunning amount of the things that pop into our head, like those thoughts you just listed off, and the things that we feel from moment to moment in our lives, a stunning percentage. Some people, my friend Daniel Amen said he thinks up to 80% from his research. 80% of the things you think and feel are false. They are
Wow,
not
that's a big number.
verifiably true. It's a huge number. So that means that when you just have a thought pop into your head like, nobody ever respects me, or I'm never going to be able to do this, or I can't
That's not
overcome
going to
this.
work, or
Yeah, or whatever it is, or I'll never be as pretty as she is, or I'll never be as smart as that guy, or whatever. I can't do this because I got the wrong genetics from my mom and dad. Whatever that is that pops into your head, the worst thing you can do is agree with that automatic thought and begin to react to it as if it were true, because so many times it's not true. And so, just as a tiny proof case of that, I'll ask everybody to think about one time when you received a text message from your spouse or your kid or your teacher or your boss or somebody, and you looked at it and you got enraged by it and you replied immediately, you big jerk, why did you say that to me? How dare you say that? Or whatever. You got offended and you replied. And then you quickly got a reply that said, what are you talking about? That's not what I meant at all. And you read the text again and you misread it. And you reacted and you responded in an angry way. And now you have to apologize and try to repair and take it back. And you didn't mean it because you reacted to something you felt that turned out not to be true. So I would just say, if you've done that one time, then you should say, wow, maybe I should have a strategy for not reacting to things until I investigate them and determine if they're true first. And so if you know that a large percentage of your automatic thoughts and feelings are false, then you can say, okay, humans have been given this incredible gift that's called, the psychologists call it metacognition. Cognition is this ability to think about what you're thinking about and what you're feeling instead of just reacting to it. You can sort of say, I'm going to just take a second and get in my mind, which is different than my brain, and I'm going to just think about my thoughts for a minute. What are the 3 most common things I thought today? I'm going to write those down. I'm going to journal. How often did I have the same thought? I'm a loser, or I'll never succeed, whatever. And if you do that, journal that 3 most common thoughts, you're going to find another piece of research that turns out to be true, that about 90% of the things that we think about from day to day are about the same set of things that we thought about the next day or the previous day. So most of us, most of the time, think the same stuff over and over and over in our lives, pretty much all the time. So just prove that to yourself with journaling for a few days. So take those 2 things I just told you. Most of us think the same thoughts over and over every day, and most of the automatic thoughts and feelings that we think aren't true. So those 2 things. And then this ability that you have to think about your thoughts and your feelings instead of just reacting to them. So take those 3 things and say this to yourself. If I wanted to write myself one prescription to increase the amount of time I spend in my life happy and improving things instead of apologizing or trying to fix things, it would be the best thing I could do would be to determine and make a decision that I'm not going to react to a thought or feeling ever again. I'm going to think about them first and then respond to the ones that are true or require a response. Because if it's not true, you don't need to respond to it. And so
So
that means
good.
about 80% of the things that pop into your head or 80% of the things that you feel don't actually deserve a response. They're just brain activity that's making you feel something. Okay. So practical application. Again, you mentioned 2 Corinthians 10:5, where Paul says we take every thought captive, right? Philippians 4:6 through 8 says, if you want to be less anxious, be more grateful. Instead, think about something different. He gives you a whole list of things you could potentially think about instead of how you're anxious you are. And that's a note to say the way God built your brain is that you can be anxious or you can be grateful, but you can't be both at the same time
Right, isn't
neurologically.
that so cool? I love that so much. It's one of my favorite things that God did in our brains.
Literally true, structurally true. You can't, your brain can't process anxiety and gratitude at the same time. So if you're feeling anxious, make yourself think about something you're grateful for. You'll feel less anxious. It's neurologically true. It's a one way switch. So that those sets of things I had to set up on the science side to give you the prescription. Then the prescription is when God says take every thought captive, he's literally saying like everything you think about it before you react to it. And if you can just develop that as a habit, guess what's going to happen?
Mhm.
That neuroplasticity process that we talked about a while ago, that's the process by which your brain wires things in and automates them and makes them habitual. That's how you become something different than you are now. Your brain structurally changes in response to the thoughts that you think. And so we know that the vast majority of the new wires that get laid down in your brain happen in response to thought processes that you're having. So it's no surprise then if 90% of us think about this, 90% of the things you think about every day are the same things you thought about yesterday. And the things you think about are what wires in automated habits in your brain. Then it's no surprise that most of us think, this is just who I am. This is just how it is with me. It's because we keep wiring in and making more robust the same sets of things that we thought about the day before. And so over time, we're not even aware anymore that we've made those decisions. They just become automated and they just become how we react at a baseline level. And so what this all really means, Laura, is that most of how we are in our lives is the result of a long standing reapplication of the same set of thought processes every day. It's not that external events are keeping us where we are. It's not that other people are preventing us from changing or growing or accomplishing things or closing those gaps. It's not that God has his thumb on the scales against us. It's that we keep thinking the same thoughts over and over. And as soon as we're ready to think different set of thoughts, our brains will become different brains than we've had. That they will literally structurally change. That's why I call the book Self Brain Surgery. Like if you think about what I do in the operating room, I intentionally make a structural change in my patient's brain for the purpose of improving their life in some way. And when you change what you think about from, okay, I'm such a loser, or I'm never able to do this, or these people keep messing me up. When you stop thinking about that and you start thinking something that God said is true of your life, like, hey, I've got a good plan for you. I have a plan to
Mhm.
prosper you and not to harm you. I plan to give you hope and a future. And I've built your mid-anterior cingulate so it's going to get more robust and help you be less resistant to change if you start moving. And I've built your amygdala to be less reactive if you start thinking of gratitude instead of things that you're anxious about. If you instead of pondering how bad you feel all the time, if you start pondering all the opportunities that I'm giving you, I've literally built you to become a different person in response to that. That's why Ephesians chapter 4 says, be made new in the attitude of your mind. Romans 12, 1 and 2 is brain and mind. So Romans 12:1 says, present your bodies as a living sacrifice to God, right? What's your body? Your brain is in your body. Your
It
brain's part
is.
of your body. And then in Romans 12:2, don't conform anymore to the pattern of this world. What's the pattern of the world? I just said 90% of the time, we're all thinking the same thoughts over and over.
Right.
We believe our feelings. We follow our hearts. We'd let other people tell us what our value is and how worthy we are based on our Instagram profiles, right? That's what the world does. He says, don't do that. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Like let me change your mind, and my process that I put in place in you will change your brain. And then your brain will make your body feel different and make your life look different than it has. So you
How
get on
good
top
is
of
our
that.
God that
That's right.
he has designed our brains to do this?
Exactly.
That he actually wants this love, joy, peace, hope for us. And he has given us a way to get it. Circumstances are going to happen. He says, in the world, there will be tribulation. Like there's going to be trouble in this world. He lays it out. There's no promises of all sunshine and roses. He said, but be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. And he can help us do this. I know as you're talking and you're talking about this 90% of the thoughts that repeat and of the things we think about. That I even think about, like, I'll have pretend conversations in my head of someone who I'm going to run
That's
into or
right.
something that's going to happen. And I'm like, and then they'll say, and then I'll say, and then they'll say, and then I'll say,
That's
like,
right.
I am just spinning myself into a terrible situation there because I am creating a whole field of thoughts when I might not even ever have that conversation with
That's
that
right.
person. They
And
might
you're
not
not
ever say any of the things. And I've just filled my head with all these thoughts that are making me feel angry or defensive, or I'm like, I have to prove myself, or frustrated, when I can flip that switch by when those things come into my head by holding that thought captive, saying, Laura, here's me pausing to think if my thoughts or feelings are
right.
real, right? This conversation might not happen. So don't let yourself have it in your head. Like, I can literally say that to myself and halt it in the moment. And I
That's
can
right.
also, like you said, use gratitude. I can be like, okay, obviously something is spurring this conversation in my head, but what can I be grateful for either in the situation that I'm concerned about? Because sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm gonna have to go to this place and see this person. What about, what can I be grateful for about going to that place? Or, about maybe I have to go to that meeting and meet with that person, but also it's a town with, I don't know, some things I love, a park I love, or a coffee shop I love. Like,
Yeah.
how can I, like, express gratitude and that? And if I can't think of any gratitude for that specific situation, just gratitude in my life in general. Like, my crocuses are blooming in my yard, Dr. Lee, right now. And that is such a gift because it's been so incredibly cold in Ohio. And just
Yeah.
those little purple flowers peeking their heads out just is like joy and new life and hope to me.
Yeah.
So, what can I be grateful for?
That's right.
Um, we can actually stop those things, and we're all guilty of it, right? Like, I'm hearing you talk and I'm like, yep, I just let my brain go. Um, and it's taking that intentionality, be like, okay, Laura, what is your brain saying? Because truth is what's in scripture.
That's right. It's
We
important to
have.
note too, and this is what you just said is so important. Your brain doesn't actually have an ability to discern between something that's real and actually happening and something that you're just imagining. So when you think about a conversation, for example, your brain will begin to wire in and change your physiology, release stress hormones and all those things as if that conversation were actually happening. And so then you're basically preparing yourself neurologically as if that adverse thing had already occurred. And then you're going to call it into being because when you actually meet that person, you're going to go into that conversation wired up as if it had already occurred. And you're going to transmit. So we don't necessarily think about this, or most people probably don't even know, but you affect other people. By the time you get within 15 meters of them, your electromagnetic field is affecting theirs. Your heart coherence is affecting theirs. You will raise their blood pressure and affect their mirror neurons, and they will begin to emulate your emotional state. This is the Debbie Downer effect, right? When somebody who's in a really bad mood walks into a room, you get in a bad mood too, but you haven't
Yeah.
even talked to them yet. There are things about us that affect other people non-verbally and electrochemically and through physics mechanisms that most of us don't even understand. And so you have a responsibility to steward not just the words that you say, but the meditation of your heart, as David said.
Mm,
God,
yeah.
search me and know me and test my anxious thoughts. Like check me because I know that my thoughts aren't always reliable. He's saying, know me and show me if there's any offensive way in me. Like that's the kind of stuff we should be rehearsing with ourselves, right? Not,
Yeah.
oh, I'm going to say this and then they're going to say that and all this,
Right.
because you're going to call that into being, even if you never speak it. Like they're going to be affected by you. And what's your job in relation to other people? It's to honor God with your life, to show them the path to truth, right? If you walk into that room and you've been blessing them, bless your enemies and do not curse them. If you've been blessing them in that conversation and asking God to open a door and show you a way to mend a bridge, to mend a fence, and to create an opportunity to have a relationship with them or influence them in some way, you'll affect them before they ever even see you coming. You have the upper hand in that conversation because
Mm,
now you're blessing them. They can't get to you. You're imperturbable. You've developed that neurological untouchability. And that is where you're going to create opportunities for blessing and have
mhm.
a relationship instead of fight or flight. And so use self brain surgery to your advantage and do what David did, said, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing to you. So you're then
Acceptable in
asking
thy
God,
sight,
hey,
O
I want to
Lord,
be
my
accountable
rock
for
and
what
my
I say.
redeemer.
I want to be accountable for what I think about too.
Yeah, that's so good. And we are called to love one another as Christ has loved us. So that means, like you said, praying in advance if we know if we start having the conversation about what we're going to say to them. Like instead, we could be like, okay, Lord, I don't want to be like this. How can I love them? Show me
Yeah,
how I can love them. Show me something to love about them. They're created in your image too. Like, how can I love them? So good.
that's right.
Okay, Dr. Lee, you talk about how all these things we've talked about intentionally changing our thoughts, can actually benefit our children. I have 4 kids of my own, and so this matters to me because I want their lives to be amazing. How can me changing my thoughts benefit my kids?
I'm glad you asked that. This is the perfect place to land this conversation because it gives us hope for the future. There are things that happen in our children's lives. And especially if you haven't had your kids yet, if there's anybody listening that hasn't had children yet, this will be a blessing to you. Really good research that shows that when humans experience trauma or adversity, or even just perceived adversity, there are molecular changes in the molecules that affect how your genes are turned on and off. These are called epigenetics, these switches that aren't your DNA, but they control what happens to your DNA. That when
Wow.
you go through some kind of stressful event, your DNA is expressed differently. Genes are turned on and turned off, and that those things are inheritable. And so, down to 4 generations, this has been studied in Holocaust survivors, down to 4 generations, the great grandchildren of people who went through the Holocaust are born with an abnormally high cortisol level. And so, that
Goodness
means
gracious.
that a lot of the things that you feel uncomfortable about in your life aren't because you've experienced something, it's because somebody in your line ahead of you did.
Wow.
When we talk about things that tend to run in families like alcoholism or abuse or those kinds of things, a lot of it has to do with something that didn't get resolved in a previous generation. And so the Bible would, some people would call those generational curses. There's these
Mhm.
verses in the Bible that says, hey, down to your great grandkids can pay for the sins of the fathers. God's not threatening you, He's warning you. Be careful how you live because the things that you do and the decisions that you make and the conversations that you have with yourself affect your great grandkids. Okay.
Uh,
That research, though, is really hopeful because it's been shown if you are one of those great grandkids that has an abnormal stress response, if you do the work and get that fixed and you learn how to process things better, your kids can be born with a normal stress response.
uh,
Those things get turned off in one
praise
generation,
God.
right? And so, as your kids who are already alive, you affect them through the mechanisms I described a while ago, electromagnetically, through your
Mhm.
heart coherence, through your mirror neurons, all the things that nonverbal things, plus everything you say to them gets wired into their nervous system and affects how they express and what their brains become. And so, and then you can train them as you're raising them that you don't have to listen to your feelings. You don't have to believe every thought that pops into your head. You have agency and control over what you become. Like you get to decide how you're going to feel. Other people can't make you feel something. You have to decide that, and your brain chemistry will change in response to what you think about. So you have a lot of power. Like you're not a victim of somebody else on Instagram being
So
mean
good.
to you. You have power there. So from a parenting standpoint, there's great hope for you to impact the future generation by teaching them that they have control over what happens to their brains and their bodies in their life. And you have great power to teach them that there is an influence that reaches down into future generations if they get this right. And so we have a responsibility and we have something we can do about it. The social scientists define hope as agency and opportunity. So that means if you have the ability to do something and the opportunity to do it, then you can be hopeful that it's possible for you. And I'm just telling you that your creator has wired you where you do have the ability to do these things and you have the opportunity with every thought you think. And so there's no reason ever not to have hope. As for me, I will have hope. Psalm 71:14 says there is a reason for you to have hope, and it's because of how God built your brain and your mind and your life.
Praise God. Praise God. Praise God. Okay, Dr. Lee, that was so brilliant. It makes me definitely want to perform brain surgery on myself. As you
Yep.
say, I ask every guest on the show a 2-part question. And the first one is if you could nudge listeners to do one thing this week, what would you nudge them to do?
Don't believe ever that you're stuck because
Mm,
you're not. Your stuckness depends on thinking the things that have gotten you stuck, not the fact that you're intrinsically stuck. So as soon as you're ready to get unstuck, start thinking a different set of thoughts and your brain will change and you can move forward.
amazing. So good. And what do you feel God nudging you to do this week?
My big sin is saying yes to everything. I'm having to learn balance and in the holy word no, no is a complete sentence.
It is
And
indeed.
I'm trying to learn that. At 57 years old, I'm trying to learn how to say no.
That's good. That's good advice for all of us too, because again, sometimes our thoughts or feelings make us feel like we have to say yes to things, but we're
That's
allowed to
right.
pause and say, is that actually a yes or a no? And Lord, help me discern. So That's awesome. Dr. Lee, you are so wise, and I could have talked to you for about 10 hours about all of this because it's so
Thank you.
good. But for people who just loved this and want to dive deeper, how can they find your book and how can they find you?
drleewarren.com, DRLEEWARREN.com. Everything, my podcast, my books, my newsletter, everything's there. Dr. Lee Warren. I'm at Dr. Lee Warren on Instagram. I'm easy to find. So,
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. I am so grateful for you.
Laura, it's a blessing. Good to see you. God bless.
How incredible that God has wired our brains for hope and healing. Dr. Lee Warren is so wise. I took notes and can't wait to implement some of his suggestions into my day to day, like remembering that 80% of my thoughts aren't true and asking Jesus what is true and how he wants me to respond. I'm also a huge fan of practicing gratitude. Grab yourself a copy of Dr. Lee Warren's The Life-Changing Art of Self-Brain Surgery to learn more. Make sure you're subscribing to the This Is Your Nudge podcast so you won't miss the next awesome episode. And for more ways to step into the dreams and ideas God places on your heart, make sure to follow me on Instagram and Substack at Laura Smith Author. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on whatever platform you're listening on. Reviews really help others find this content. Praying for you as you intentionally step into whatever God has for you this week, and that you remember mighty Jesus loves you and will give you everything you need.